Andy Zodin has been the director of tennis at Columbine Country Club since 2011. He's the president of the USPTA Intermountain Division. He's a sports talk radio host with Mile High Sports Radio and KickServeRadio.com. He's been a USPTA Elite Pro since 1984, and he played at the University of Texas. Andy, welcome to the webinar.
Thanks, Kevin. Great being on with such a good group like Dave and Emma. I appreciate being part of it.
You've developed a revenue stream through advertising and sponsorship from your radio shows. How did you get started on this path?
You know, like Dave, I was a writer, albeit a magazine writer. I had approached a magazine in Houston Health and Fitness magazine back in the 90s, and I was thumbing through the magazine, and I felt that they were missing a lot of their demographic, not having any tennis in a health and fitness magazine, because at the time we were starting to see the influence of Yvonne Lendl and Jim Courier and some of the people that had taken fitness in tennis to such high levels that it became something that was sort of part of everybody's lifestyle if they were trying to play competitive tennis, yet the health and fitness industry hadn't necessarily picked up on that. And I approached a magazine and said, I feel like you could pick up a substantial market share if you allow me to put some things about, be it pro tennis or club tennis or, you know, anything in between. And so it started that way back in Houston. And then I moved to Denver in 2001, came across a magazine called Mile High Sports Magazine, and I approached them to see if they were interested in having me do something similar to what I had done back in Texas. And we all got together and met, and it turned out that Mile High Sports Magazine also owned Mile High Sports Radio. And they had done some research to the extent that they felt that the airwaves were pretty well saturated with sports talk radio, but that there wasn't a lot of tennis included in all of that, and that they thought that based on their conversations with me, I might be a good person to try to sort of pilot some of that, which at the time I was kind of an avid watcher of Mike and Mike in the Morning, sort of fancied myself as a poor man's Greenie, if you will, and said I would give it a go. And that was at the end of '07. I started my show, which was in the Tennis Zone on Sunday nights on Mile High Sports Radio back in '08, and have been on the air with them ever since, and have since started the podcast, which you mentioned, which is KickServeRadio.com, which has a little bit more of a nationwide, actually a worldwide outreach because it's on the internet, and have been enjoying it ever since. And I've had some friends with Tennis Channel that have helped me along the way. So it's been a lot of fun, and it has, certainly not anything for me to quit my day job over, but there have been some good perks, and it's added to my bottom line for sure.
Well, so in terms of your bottom line, I mean, could you describe the business model and profitability of it?
Yeah, I mean, at Mile High Sports, it's a unique business model because effectively it's brokered airtime, which means they kind of qualify you, first of all, to make sure that they can even offer you airtime on their station. You have to have content and be able to sort of articulate your message in a way that is becoming of what they want on their station. And once you've sort of gone through that approval process, they then give you a spot, whether it's a daily spot that you have, at the same time every day, Friday, or they do something that is weekly, and whatever it is, there's a fee attached to that. So let's say your fee is $10,000 a year for your spot. They then give you enough inventory to sell for the advertising revenue that would equate to, if you were to max out and do everything just right, you could probably make about 5 to 1 on your money. So that's kind of how that deal works. Now, a lot of the guys that are pure radio guys, they max out and they make 5 to 1 on their investment. I'm the director of tennis at a country club, and I've got a lot to do with that. I'm president of USPTA Intermountain. I've got a lot to do with that. So my goal is to make a little bit of money so that at the end of the year I can take my wife on a nice vacation or whatever the case may be. There are some perks that come with it. I can do some trade arrangements with different people, and we get media credentials. I do have my wife work with me as part of the show. She does a lot of the commercial work and so on. And so we get media credentials to go to Indian Wells and cover that tournament every year. Obviously not this year. But there's a lot of perks that between trades and then, the cash value of the commercials that we sell to the advertisers. It's a nice little sum to add to the bottom line. A good year is, $10,000 in profit, and, a not so good year, I make a couple $1,000 and a couple of nice perks in trade, whether it be with a chiropractor or somebody that I need their services, and we can work something out in trade. But as long as my obligations are covered to the radio station, everything else goes to me.
Okay. Now, you're relying on these advertisers, and
Right.
I know that one challenging thing is to show them a return on investment. I mean, how do you approach that?
So effectively, what I've learned is that when you go on the air and you do this, you have to tell your clients that the return on investment is going to be negligible at best. And what I've learned to do over time is to sell this as a branding opportunity. At our station, the advertising rates are extremely modest. I can sell advertising units from like 50 cents to $1 a unit. So I can have a company invest, $1,000 or $2,000 with me for the year, lots and lots of mentions on air throughout the course of the year. So it's hard to quantify what the ROI is a lot of times, but they're getting a lot of mentions. The other thing is that I've got a very captive audience at my club, and I still play some competitive tennis. So I'm going to tournaments, I'm going to conferences. And so effectively what I'm doing is I'm selling myself as a contract representative for their company to just get the word out. And I've had one guy who's got a wellness clinic here in town who picked up 22 clients in 1 year, probably 3 or 4 of which came from my radio show and the rest of which came from my tennis court. So I try to package the radio as one component of everything that they get from Andy Zodin as a guy that's out in and amongst the public and out and amongst the tennis community, sort of speaking on behalf of their company and trying to move business in their direction, so that at the end of the year they can kind of say, this was worthwhile for me. In other cases, you basically have just people that are addicted to the sport of tennis that can afford to just support something like what we're doing so that they can be a part of something that's keeping tennis content on the air and making sure that people are hearing more and more about tennis on the radio. So to some extent, I get people that just say, I like the fact that you're doing something to further our message. USTA Colorado is one of my sponsors. We talk a lot about some of the different initiatives that they take on here and push, as many league players into the system and tournament players as we can. Try to, appeal to the grassroots by talking about other sports in the midst of talking about tennis, so that people that aren't necessarily involved in tennis already then get some exposure to it. So it's a blend of people that are looking for an ROI with people that are just looking for branding, with people that are just looking to support tennis on the air.
Well, it's clear that, Andy, that you have a lot of experience in seeking sponsors. And so, it occurs to me that, tennis directors, of course, when they're running events, they have their tournaments, they're going to be trying to get sponsors for it. Do you have, just from all the experience that you've gained from this, and already, it occurs to me that it's more than just promoting, say, a sponsor during the course of a tournament, but and having their banner up and that kind of thing, but like throughout the year, actually supporting the sponsors and really, trying to push people that way. Do you have any recommendations or comments for the tournament directors out there as they seek sponsors for their events, given your experience in that area?
Well, in the case of radio, I think what I try to do is look at people that I know play tennis, or that somebody said this is somebody that really likes to support anything tennis related. I think if you can focus more on people that are selling something, let's call it big ticket item, more so than small tickets. So for instance, if I have a guy that spends $1,000 or $2,000 with me to advertise his Mercedes-Benz dealership, if he sells one car, he's paid for his tab with me for, 3-4 years. Whereas how many hamburgers does a guy need to sell, to pay for, his spot with me every year? So if you go for the, the attorneys and the doctors and the car dealerships and those kinds of things, where the the entity can make one sale based on what happened in doing business with you and sort of pay their nut for the year, that's a pretty easy way to go with respect to acquiring good sponsors. Obviously, you want to try to work within your warm market. It can be tricky at your own club. You don't want to be a very aggressive salesperson. You don't want to be, not to offend anybody that might or might not be on the call, but an insurance sales type person or a used car sales type person. You just have to make certain comments, in the midst of your normal walk of everyday life to say, yeah, this is what I do. This is how it works. Yeah, I'd love to have you participate with us. Sometimes you get a guy that's willing to advertise with you just because his kid is a nationally ranked kid, and you know that you're going to talk about his kid on your radio show from time to time, and kind of that's good enough for him. So you have to sort of use your people skills and your intuition toward what is going to turn sort of someone that might be in your warm market into somebody that says, yeah, I absolutely want to be a part of what you're doing. And then you just have to kind of work on feel that way. And then in my case, what I do is about a $6,500 a year obligation. So I try to work in, $1,000 to $2,000 increments. So I only have to pick up about 3 or 4 sponsors a year. Most of those are renewals. And, I don't want to be confused, as someone that's always, whenever you see me coming, you better kind of put your hand on your wallet because I'm going to ask you for something. I don't want to be that guy. But I do want to be the guy that lets people know that what I've got is very unique. It's entertaining. People are listening to it. People are enjoying it. And, I've got a startup company. I'd like to get the word out on it for a couple $1,000. I can do that with Andy. We're already friendly. I know he's going to look after me. And the other thing is that I'll guarantee someone a certain amount of units per year, and we will always exceed that. We will always sort of under promise and over deliver on the amount of times that your company is going to be mentioned on my show. So as long as we live up to that, so far I've had people that have stuck with me for several years at a time. Some have shown greater ROIs than other, and some have just been, happy to be a part of something that, kind of started as a little bit of what some considered to be a pipe dream back in 2008 to something that's still going strong in 2020 and has evolved into, quite a few other things. It's led to some opportunities. I've done 7 or 8 seasons with Tennis Channel with the Best of 5 and with the 10 and some of those shows where, having worked together with Tennis Channel, they've invited me to tape with them and do some things, and emceeing opportunities for, Colorado Tennis Hall of Fame induction galas and things. And it's created greater value, I think, here locally for me, and particularly with our club. They like the fact that I do what I do, and that, I don't try to go out and sell memberships on the air, but that I do give the club some good PR, and I think they like that.
Oh, fantastic. If somebody wants to get started in this area, where should they begin?
I think what happened with me was I was in the right place at the right time when I approached Mile High Sports Magazine. But then I've learned a lot since then about program directors, and you hopefully know somebody who's on air, maybe that you've had some exposure to. Find a television sports or radio guy that you know of that plays tennis. If you've got a particular, sports talk radio show locally that you like to listen to, but you wish that they had a little tennis on there, but they clearly don't, and you feel that you can offer that niche and you can get on the air and you can come up with some entertaining topics and some entertaining guests, and you can blend talking about pro tennis while talking about local tennis. One of the things that our market gets a big kick out of here is that in one breath I'm talking about, a finals match between Federer and Nadal, and in the next breath I'm talking about these 2 10-year-olds that played this unbelievable 12 and under final in the City Open, and having those 2 levels of tennis being spoken about so close to each other, I think gets people pretty excited. And so what you try to do is make sure you've got that blend of talking about the things that, people want to hear about, from big time professional level to making sure that the local people that are putting on the events are getting some love as well. You're talking about people who have a team that advanced to nationals that year and what the experience was like. Hopefully you've got some contacts in professional tennis that will come on the show and talk to you once in a while, but you're also bringing on the local USTA people, the local USPTA people, giving your local pros an opportunity to talk about their unique events or to give tennis tips on air, and just putting this big smorgasbord of tennis items and tennis topics all together in one sort of 1 or 2 hour show or however long it is, and then selling that to a program director and saying, here's everything I can bring you, and I can increase your listenership because nobody else is doing tennis. That's effectively what I did. Was I sold this as just like what your podcast is trying to talk about, is a niche opportunity here. This isn't something that anyone else is doing. Sports talk radio hosts, not to belittle them because they're great, but there's a lot of them out there. The market is very, very saturated. The market is not saturated with people doing what I'm doing here in Denver. I mean, there are certainly some out there, and over the course of the past 12 years, the market size has increased, but not to the point where there's oversaturation. And if you can convince a program director that you're going to be able to bring sponsors and listeners to their airwaves right now, that carries a lot of weight.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you, Andy.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. I appreciate it. Thanks for giving me the opportunity. It's good to reach your listeners there in the South. I miss it.